Hello and welcome back to Biology. My name is Mr. Kubuske and I'm going to be guiding you through our talk today. We're going to begin talking about the process of cell division and reproduction. We're actually going to break this up into two parts. Today we're going to focus on the types of reproduction, and then in the next section we're going to talk about actual process of cell division and the cell cycle and any problems that can arise during that process. So again, today we're going to talk about reproduction specifically, and we'll talk about why cells need to divide and why we need to be able to reproduce. But there's three key ideas about why cells need to be able to divide. The first one is that we each need to grow in our own way. Even a single-celled organism has to grow. And if you're multicellular, the only way that you grow is by adding more cells. Remember, we learned in Unit 4 that cells don't get bigger, we just make more of them, and it makes them more efficient that way. So if I want to grow, or if I'm going to go through a growth spurt, I have to add more cells. So this is the first reason why cells need to divide. The second reason is to repair. If you have a cut, like I do from playing with my little puppy, this hole now in my finger is not going to be there forever. And what's going to happen is that over time, those cells are going to be repaired and replaced, which is the next two. What happens is that there's something called regulatory proteins, and this is called an external regulatory protein because when these cells on my skin no longer touch another cell, meaning that there's a gap or a cut in between them, there's a cue for them to start replicating and to start making more cells to fill in that gap and to heal that skin. And that's how you're able to heal from cuts and injuries and things like that. It's because of those regulatory proteins. But grow, repair, and replace. Your cells will die. They live a normal life. They have a birth and a death, and they reproduce in between. So you have to replace those dead cells. Interesting fact, every hour in your body you replace 1 billion cells. So think about that for a second as you start to talk about reproduction here. Okay. So again, we're going to just focus on reproduction today. We're going to talk about the types. But what is reproduction? It just means making more of your own kind. Okay. You can see we've got moms with their babies here, and in fact this is still a mom and this is her babies here. Actually, she kind of becomes one of them, but we'll talk more about that when we talk about the types of reproduction. First type is asexual reproduction, meaning that you only have one parent. It's a single parent passes on all of their traits to their offspring. So that means that the offspring is going to be genetically identical to the parent. The advantage of this, actually, believe it or not, does not just apply to single-celled organisms. There are actually some animals, like this whip-tailed lizard here, that actually is asexual. Their species are asexual. It's advantageous to them to be asexual. It's an evolutionary characteristic, you might say. So what would be the advantage of this whip-tailed lizard? And if you want to read more about this whip-tailed lizard, go to the website, click on the link that says Sex, What is it good for? There's a great article about advantages and disadvantages of asexual and sexual reproduction. But the advantage of asexual reproduction is that whip-tailed lizard, that female doesn't have to find a mate in order to reproduce. She can just constantly keep making more copies of herself and putting them into the environment, which is good for a species that needs to make lots of copies because they go through a quick life cycle, or maybe they have lots of predators or their environmental challenges that cause them to not survive at a good rate. That would be the advantage of asexual reproduction. Let me give you an example. If I've got 10 lizards, let's say, and if they're all asexual, that means if they all reproduce, then I get 10 more lizards for a total of 20. But if I have 10 lizards that are sexual, well, that means only 5 of them can really reproduce because 5 of them are male and the other 5 are female. So those 5 females can each make 5 babies. So now I only have 15 lizards. So over time, you can see that it would exponentially increase the numbers of your species. The disadvantage, though, is that we said that everybody is exactly identical, meaning if I have, let's say, a disease or a disorder that comes into my population and affects me as an individual, if I'm exactly the same as everybody else, that means everybody else is going to be affected the exact same way. So one simple disease can wipe out an entire population. Not only that, you're less likely to evolve and change because there are not genetic differences that you need in order to survive as a species. So sexual reproduction is when you have 2 parents. They each give you half of their genetic information. You put those 2 halves together. Those halves are found in what's known as sex cells or gametes. You put those 2 sex cells together during a process called fertilization, or when sperm and egg meet. Okay, when that happens, you get an offspring, and that offspring is going to be genetically different than their parents, although they're going to have some traits from mom and some traits from dad. When I put them together, it makes a unique individual. Okay, so just as a quick review, in case you weren't paying attention in sex ed in middle school, boy meets girl, boy and girl have sexual intercourse in the case of human beings. During that process, sperm meets egg. And when that happens, the fertilized egg will grow and develop, and the mom is considered pregnant. And then after 9 months in human beings, and shorter time sometimes in other animals, you get a baby. Okay, that is sexual reproduction. So, what's the advantage of sexual reproduction? We said what was the advantage earlier. It's genetic differences, is that each one of us is genetically different than others, which means some of us have advantages or disadvantages to other people, or maybe that we are able to survive diseases that others can't. Maybe we have immunities in our genes because of our unique combination of genes makes us better suited to our environment or to survival than others. So that's the big advantage. The disadvantage, though, is that you have to actually spend time and energy and resources to find a mate. And you may think as a human being, oh, that's not really what I do. But believe it or not, each one of us kind of does something similar to our friend here, the bird of paradise.
In the great island of New Guinea, there are 42 different species of birds of paradise, each more bizarre than the last.
So you can see those genetic differences definitely coming into play right here. Now the question is, are these males or females? Now why are they acting like this? Is there something wrong with them? Oh my gosh. Maybe that guy.
So rich that nourishing food can be gathered very quickly. That leaves the male six-plumed bird of paradise with time to concentrate on other matters, like tidying up his display area.
So these are actually all males that we've seen so far. And what they're trying to do is, by their displays, the way that they look, and the dances that they do, or this guy cleaning up his dance floor, they're trying to attract a mate. So he has to spend time and energy to attract a mate. So this is the disadvantage of sexual reproduction. And now you may say to yourself, well, why would he do something crazy like this just to attract a mate? Well, believe it or not, some of you guys do the exact same things in the hallways. Okay. So let's go back to what we were talking about. Sorry. Ooh. Come on, close. Okay. So that would be the disadvantage then to sexual reproduction, is because you have to spend that time and energy to find a mate. Okay. You grow by making more cells. You grow because of asexual reproduction. You are alive because of sexual reproduction, but believe it or not, each one of your cells are asexual, which means asexual reproduction is occurring inside of you all the time. Remember, small cells are more efficient than large cells, so in order to grow and divide and get bigger, you have to make more cells. Okay. All of your cells produce asexually, and that cell reproduction is part of something known as the cell cycle, which we will talk about at a later time. So hopefully this was helpful to you. Hopefully you got something out of it. Again, the important thing to understand is that there are advantages to both asexual and sexual reproduction. And just because asexual reproduction was around first, the very first organisms on the planet were asexual, doesn't mean that that's not necessarily not as good as sexual reproduction, I guess you might say. So, again, hopefully you learned something. I look forward to seeing you in the next section when we talk about the cell cycle, which, as you can obviously see, is our next part. But if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and have a great day.